The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, and welcome to today's webinar hosted by Grantham University on what you need to do to prepare yourself for the transition to civilian life. You will receive a follow-up email with links to information about Grantham's programs and its services for the military. Today we're going to cover a number of topics. First, the types of education that are the most important or useful in the job market. 2, the obstacles that service members encounter when pursuing their education and how to overcome them. 3, the support and financial aid available for service members. And 4, the value of higher education for those who choose to remain in the military. Now, before we begin, I'd like to provide you with some information that will help you participate. 1, this will be a highly interactive event with the speakers answering questions from the audience. So please submit your questions at any time through the question function that you should find on your screen, and I will read them after each speaker is done. If we do not get to your question, our panelists will reply to you personally by email after event. The system does save your questions. 2, you can minimize the control panel that you see by clicking the orange right-facing arrow on the side. This will squeeze the control panel down and maximize the viewing area. You can also grab that control panel and move it around your screen if you want to get it out of the way of some particular thing that you're trying to prevent from covering. And finally, a recording of the event will be made available soon. Please watch for notice of the recording by email, as well as on our webpage. With that, I'd like to introduce our panel of experts. Chief Master Sergeant John M. Harris recently retired from 26 years of service in the Air Force and Air National Guard, including mobilization as part of Operation Desert Storm and Operation Enduring Freedom. Dr. Jeff Cropsey has served over 4 decades in the military education sector, including as Major Command Staff Officer with the U.S. Air Force Education Services Program and as Director of the Defense Activity for Non-Traditional Education Support, also known as DANTES. He was also the Director of the Voluntary Education Department of the U.S. Navy, Naval Education and Training Professional Development, and Technology Center, where he oversaw the management and execution of the Voluntary Education Program, Navy-wide. Third, George Cowan served as Company Training Assessor and Developer at the U.S. Army Recruiting Command. With that, I would like to turn it over to our first panelist, Chief Master Sergeant John M. Harris.
Well, good morning, everybody. My portion of the briefing is basically relaying my story about how I allowed obstacles to overcome my educational goals. Ultimately, I was able to complete them before getting out of the service, thankfully, but the rest of the briefing is just going to be a quick synopsis of what I was faced with and how I overcame them. Can you advance the slide, please?
Okay.
And next slide. You know, the thing that I think everyone ought to at least ask themselves in the beginning, regardless of what stage of the service that you're in, is what are your motivations to even get the education? You know, ultimately, at the end of this story, my motivation was that I was facing retirement and having to go into the civilian sector for employment or follow-on employment. But initially, it didn't start out that way. You know, probably the promotion, self-improvement, future military career, you know, all of those things were what started me on that path for higher education. Next slide. Back in '84, when I first started in the service, my parents, my father specifically, was on strike with Caterpillar Tractor Company up in Illinois, and I knew that there was no way that they were going to be able to help me financially with going to school, and I was pretty much on my own, and that was what prompted me to begin a career in the military. The educational benefits, even back then, were phenomenal, and that was pretty much the starting motivation. You know, go and get my degree, and the way that I could pay for it was go to the service and use those benefits. Next slide. However, that proved to be kind of a catch-22. You know, once you get into the service, there's all kinds of things, basic training, tech school, all your military PME, deployments nowadays especially, everything supplies excuses for not actually going and getting that college education. It was the reason that I joined, but it soon became a good source of excuses as to why I couldn't finish. Next slide. I did, however, immediately get into school, you know, and we're going back to the late 80s. It was a brick and mortar institution. Any of you folks up in Illinois, Southern Illinois University was where I started. And, you know, the typical young person going through school, I was looking for ways to make Golf 101 fit the humanities requirement of some degree somewhere. But, you know, just the normal distractions of my youth started setting in. Next slide. And then we got activated for Desert Storm 1. We spent some time at Fort Hood, and not that being at Fort Hood was a main part of the story, but the significance of that deployment was that that was the first time that I realized, hey, you know what? I can justify not going to school because of this big, giant military thing that I have to do. This is obviously more important, and it gives a great excuse for me to get out of that classroom. And that was kind of where this paradigm shift took place. Next slide. It continued even after Desert Storm 1 all the way up into Enduring Freedom and, you know, lots of stops in between. But the bottom line was that my military service really became an obstacle towards civilian education, not so much because I couldn't get around them. I guess procrastination was easier than finishing, and so that was kind of the way that my path was going. Next slide. The Operation Enduring Freedom, especially now, and not that I've been over there in the last few years, but you know, I saw the other day that they've got ESPN zones over at Bagram Air Force Base now. There is connectivity. There is possibilities to get your education even when you're deployed. Couldn't probably say that 20 years ago, but you can definitely say it now. And my advice to those of you that are listening is, you know, hopefully you've got a job that doesn't prohibit you from attending your civilian education while you're deployed, but I know we've got folks over there that are still continuing their degrees even though deployments are an issue. Next slide. Even family life starts getting in the way of these kinds of things, and as you start making rank, you know, the business meetings and the TDYs and all of the different conferences that you have to attend to, those are also obstacles if you allow them to be. Next slide. Kind of a unique situation being down south. You know, Hurricane Katrina and all the things that the National Guard folks have to do for state duty, you know, it goes way beyond even deployments if you really want to get down to it. Even state missions, oil spills, wildfires out west, snowstorms in the east. Everything can be that challenge if you choose to let it stand in your way. Next slide. So as I moved up through the ranks, I'm beginning to see that, you know what, my source of excuses, number one, is going to run out. I'm going to retire here one day. However, the other paradigm shift was that as those sources of excuses run out, so do all my benefits that I joined for in the very beginning. The tuition assistance, the GI Bill, all of that stuff has expiration dates, and it's pretty much when you retire, other than the post 9/11 GI Bill. But I was getting ready to lose the benefit for the very purpose that I joined the military for, and luckily I realized that about 3 or 4 years before my retirement date actually hit. Next slide. So thanks to online universities, and I did attend Grantham, but thanks to online universities, all those conferences weren't so much an obstacle anymore. I could get around that. Deployments, I can get around that. Even all of the family life and everything else that goes with, you know, reaching the end of your career, online institutions offer you the ability to get that degree, and you don't have to drive to a brick and mortar school. You don't have to sit in a class 3 days a week on a set schedule that conferences will mess up for you. You can finish your degree with the very benefits that the military provides, and you can do it online. And luckily, I was able to finish that. I want to leave you with one last thought. This is pretty much the end of the briefing. But, you know, I don't know what the age of the attendees are out there, but I'm going to make an assumption that you're younger than I am because you're still in the service. But, you know, what is the asset that you have that I no longer have? What is the most precious thing that you can have, and once you lose it, it's gone. You don't get it back. Well, the answer to that question is time. Next slide. Next slide, please. The sooner that you start on this quest, the sooner that you start on this quest to get your degree finished, the better off, I'm telling you, the better off you're going to be when you reach the end of your military career. You do not want to find yourself at the end of your service trying to sit in a job interview for a civilian follow-on employment without a degree, because I tell you from experience, there are people with master's degrees applying for those same jobs that you're applying for out of the service. Service skills will get you, they'll get you a little bit, but you're going to find from experience they're not going to get you all the way. You don't have a degree, you're not going to get your foot in the door. And the military allows you to get that degree without any student debt. And that's the conclusion of my briefing. If there are no more questions.
Yes, well, thank you very much. And, whoops, we'd like to now go to some questions that have been submitted. Having a bit of a technical difficulty, I'm going to do a slight modification. You're going to see something on the screen, but then it will return in just a moment. And I apologize for that. While we're doing this, we have some questions. Number one, person says, I have several of the same obstacles that you experienced, deployment, disaster response, family, etc. What is the first step to overcoming these obstacles?
Well, you know, in my opinion, if you allow them to be an obstacle, then they will be for you. And you can justify, I'm telling you, you can justify it all day long. If your motivation to go and get your degree is not greater than those obstacles, then you're probably not going to go get your degree. Hopefully, I can tell you from my own experience, 20 years into the future, trust me, the obstacle should not be an obstacle. You should go get that degree. You will thank yourself 20 years from now, guarantee you.
Okay. Another question. Let's see. Sergeant, when did you find it most difficult in your career to go to school? As an NCO or SNCO era?
Well, you know, I don't know if I can put a finger on an exact spot in the career, but I will tell you the higher up in rank you go, the harder it will be. The more conferences you will go to, the more things that will take away from your time, your personal time, the sooner you get started, the better off you will be.
Okay. By the way, one person has also already said, I highly suggest online classes. So apparently they're just kind of supporting what you've been saying.
Yeah. Let me just end with this. If you go to the online option, it will. I don't want to say it won't seem like you're going to school, but I'll put it to you this way. If you have to drive Monday, Wednesday, Friday to a brick and mortar classroom and sit in that classroom on a set schedule for the next 3 months from 8 to noon, trust me, you are going to have a lot of frustration and fitting that into a military career. Online gets around all of that. You can do it at 10 o'clock at night. You can do it over lunch. You can do it first thing in the morning. It takes away all the obstacles. The online option takes away all the obstacles.
Okay. Another attendee asks, how long did it take you to complete a BA degree?
Well, from the time I started in 1984 until the time I actually got it in 2008, I think. I was a senior in college. I hit the senior level in college, and I stayed there for 15 years. I did nothing. I used all those excuses. So luckily I finished up before I retired, but I spent, well, I don't know, what is that? I'm trying to do math in public here. 16 years?
Yeah.
16 years to do my 4-year degree because I just chose not to go back. I can tell you I knocked out that master's degree in 2 years. It didn't take me very long once I got the bug.
Okay, oh, cool. Quite a few questions coming in here now. Did you use CLEP and Dante's to help? How was studying if you did use them? How was the studying if you did use them? I'm not quite sure if I understand the second part, but go ahead.
Yeah, I did a CLEP test during tech school in 1984. Just because somebody said, hey, you ought to go do this, and I really didn't even know what it was that I was doing at the time. It was just a group of us decided to go try it. Now, and then by the time I realized how valuable those CLEP tests are, and DSST and all the other tests that you can take to get college credit out of the way, by the time I realized how important that was, I was already at my senior level of my 4-year degree, and you're not clipping out of many 400 level classes. So by the time I realized the importance of those things, I was beyond the ability to use them. So for the one that asked the question, and for the rest of you out there that are thinking about it, I would take full advantage of CLEP testing. Every stinking one of them. They're free. You take some tutoring material. There's a lot of online resources. Give you free online tests and studying and things like that. I would use that to the maximum extent possible because it can only help you. I wish I'd have done it earlier in my career.
Okay, another interesting question. Will the command counselors assist with online courses while still active duty?
Will the command counselors? I can't speak for that, and maybe Dr. Cropsey would be the best one to answer that question, but I would tell you, if you got a counselor that's not out there helping soldiers and airmen and Marines and sailors and all the rest, I don't know what to tell you about that one. They ought to. How's that?
Okay. Well, tell you what, we have a number of more questions coming in, but we do have 3 speakers. I want to remind everyone that all these questions are being saved, so we will respond to your questions individually afterwards. And with that, we do need to move on to our next speaker. Our next speaker is George Cowan.
Hey, thanks everyone for having the time to attend here.
I apologize. It's Dr. Jeff Cropsey is our next speaker.
All right. Great. Yeah, I thought for a minute I had the wrong PowerPoint. Well,
apologize.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, depending upon where you are in internet land. Glad that you're joining us today. I think this is a great segue because Master Chief Harris just gave a perfect example of the kind of students that I had the rare privilege to work with for almost 40 years in the Department of Defense and positions with the education programs of the Army, the Air Force, the Navy, and then at the DoD level with Dante's. Also, I did have a brief military career from 1969 to 72. I was invited to be part of the U.S. Army in some of their adventures and wound up as a company commander, platoon leader, and I had lots of people in our platoon and company that took advantage of, in those days, the very simplistic educational benefits that we have, but ones that were very important even back then. If we look at the first slide up there, I've got a bunch of acronyms and organizational symbols there, as you can see, but right smack dab in the middle is the Department of Defense, and I'm going to start there by reminding you all, and hopefully you're all aware of this, is that each of the services, and also for the Coast Guard folks out there, if you want to envision a Homeland Security crest there in the middle, in your department also, there are education offices and support systems established by all of the services to provide you with not only financial support, but counseling and information about all of the possible educational programs that you might be able to take advantage of while you're on active duty. And the point of my presentation here is to really encourage you to do this while you're in the service. You know, to paraphrase the old American Express said, do not leave the service without getting involved in voluntary education. Could I have the next slide, please?
Okay. Oops.
Okay, let's talk about some things that some of you may be well aware of and some of you may not. Do you know from the first day that you went to basic training, you were a college student? The American Council on Education values military training and experience for all the services, And just so you're aware of it, I think it's 3 to 4 semester hours of credit just by doing push-ups at boot camp. So you already have a source of recommended college credit based on that training. As you progress through your various ranks and various training experiences in your services, each one of those is associated with a recommended number of credit hours. And so some of you that have been in maybe 10 or 12 years and think, well, I'm just a high school grad, if you are able to get your hands on, if you're in the Army, something called the ARTS transcript, A-A-R-E-S. If you're in the Navy and Marine Corps, it would be the SMART, the Sailor Marine American Council on Education Registry transcript. And then on the next bullet you see, I'm going to talk a little bit more about this in detail. For you Air Force folks, it would be CCAF. And the Coast Guard also has a similar transcript that's available through your Coast Guard Institute out of Oklahoma City. Could we bop back? I don't know how we wound up getting on residence courses, but we've moved to the wrong slide. Okay, great. We're still on the first bullet there. So what I want you to be aware of is that each and every one of you already has transcripted credit for your training. It also includes, in most cases, as you progress, credit for your various skill levels. You know, when you go E4, E5, E6, etc. At certain points, you will also get recommended credits for that. Depending upon the kind of school you went to, if you got into a very long and complicated, let's say an electronics school like some of the Navy folks do, or nuke power, you could get 30 semester hours recommended credit just for that. And there are thousands of colleges and universities around the United States that will take a look at that credit towards application towards their degree. So, point number one, make sure you check to see what kind of credits you have for your military training. And you can do that by going to the education office that supports you, or you can go online to the service portal that supports your particular service. Let me just pop down to the next bullet there. That's Community College of the Air Force, CCAF. I worked for the Air Force for 20 years in their ed program, and you guys have really got a good deal here, because what the Air Force did back in the early 70s was take all of their training schools and actually turn them into a community college. So they're able to give you direct semester hour credit for all of your training. And hopefully you're all aware of that, those of you that are Air Force members. But again, you can go online and get a copy of your Community College of the Air Force transcript to see exactly how many semester hours you have. And of course, you can complete your associate's degree with a major, I guess so to speak, in your AFSC by filling in the blanks of that CCAF degree. Now, those blanks generally are general education courses, which are readily available with residence courses online or through testing. So let's talk a little bit about testing. And there was a question, I think, earlier to Master Chief Harris about that, and I just want to amen that what he said about taking every test you can, and the sooner the better. I can't tell you how many times in my career as a counselor, a young airman or a soldier or a sailor would come into the office, and they would say, well, I just don't know about college. I just don't. It seems like such a long road, and I really don't feel like I'm capable of it. And I would ask them when I was a counselor, well, have you got some hobbies? Do you read a lot? Are you interested in things? Well, yeah, I like history. I like to write. I watch a lot on TV, on the History Channel or on Discovery Channel. I've had these experiences of training. All I can tell you, you would be amazed at how much knowledge is inside of your head, that if you can devote a few hours to taking the CLEP test, that stands for the College Level Examination Program, or the DSSTs, those are the old Dante Subject Standardized Tests. There's another group, the Excelsior College Examinations. All of these you can find out again at your Ed Center. But you'd be surprised how many people go in, think they're high school graduates, and they come out 4 hours later and they've got half a year college completed because they scored successfully on these CLEP tests. They're free. They don't count against you if you don't do well. So it's actually, it's a free pass, and it's on the outside. It would cost hundreds of dollars to take these tests. So you should definitely spend the time and effort to sit through these tests. And if you do it early enough, like Master Chief Harris was saying, you'll get a big boost up in working on your associate's degree or your bachelor's degree. So really think hard about that. Okay, can we move on to the next one? Now, getting your degree. So let's say you've gotten your evaluation of your credits. You know, maybe you've got recommended 15 semester hours for your training so far. You took a couple of CLEP tests. You've got another 15 semester hours or so. Now you want to get a degree going. I sort of have this a little bit backwards, and if we go down, you know, if you look at the bottom one, SOC, what that stands for is Service Members Opportunity Colleges. These are thousands of colleges and universities around the United States that have gone on record to say that they will consider the transfer of your military training credits through ACE and SMART and CCAF, like I spoke of before, and they're very liberal about taking test score credit also. So these folks would be the kinds of schools you'd want to look for that makes it easiest for you to transfer those kind of credits, and they also have gone on record to saying they'll do everything possible to help you if you have to deploy. So these are all, you know, these are the kind of schools you want to get involved in, particularly in today's highly mobile military life. Now, there's essentially two kinds of courses. You can take residence courses, and I don't mean you're going to go to the campus, but you would actually take the courses, in most cases, at the Ed Center. And they do have live courses. And when I started working in Ed Centers back in 1972, that was all there was. If you couldn't go every Tuesday and every Thursday night, you know, from 6 to 8, you just weren't going to college. So, and it's still a great way to go. And if you have the time and you like to be in a classroom situation and you like, you know, just the social aspects of it, I would highly recommend doing that. But nowadays, more and more people, in fact, the vast majority of people, the last time I saw some numbers from DOD, it's up to now 70% of the people in the military that take courses now take them online. And by online, of course, I mean computer-based courses that you would take pretty much tailored to your time and when you can fit them in. And these certainly fit not only your schedule if you deploy frequently, but even for those of you that, let's say you live just outside of D.C. and you have a long commute. I mean, it's just more simple, you know, it's just simpler. Why would you want to go back to the post at night when you could just, you know, have a cup of tea, go up and get on your computer and do your work when you feel like it at home. And they have excellent support systems now that are built in by most of these schools. Of course, Grantham is an online school, but there are many, many others that you could consider. My main point to you would be, for sure, look for schools that are service member opportunity colleges, because then you know for sure that they are dedicated to doing the best job they can for the military. So, next slide. And I think that's questions. So,
Okay. Okay, good. Thank you very much. And we have a number of questions for you here. First off, is the CCAF an accredited college? And if so, who are they accredited through?
Yes, Community College of the Air Force is accredited by the Southern Association, so of schools and colleges. So they have the same accreditor as University of Georgia, University of Alabama, North Carolina, South Carolina, you know, Florida, etc., Florida State. All of those schools are in the southern region, and CCAF is accredited by them.
Okay. We have another question. If you sign an SOC agreement with a college or university, are they required to honor that agreement after you leave the service?
Yes, they are. Yes, they are.
Okay, good, good. Let's see. Is there a list of SOC colleges, perhaps online?
Oh, yes. Yes. Again, you can go to the SOC website, SOC website, if you want, and I don't have it right here in front of me, but if you just Google Service Members Opportunity Colleges, it'll pop right up, and you can go there and find a listing. Also, let me give you one website that I will repeat to you because it's a great starting point for all education questions, and that's the Dante's website. Now, the Defense Activity for Non-Traditional Education Support, and quickly theirs is www.dantes, D-A-N-T-E-S, DODED.mil. So one more time, www.dantes.goded.mil. And you'll find all sorts of information there, including online programs to help you study for all those CLEP tests. They're free online, and they'll go over all the subjects on it. And also, there's a free online program that helps you work on your basic skills. So if you feel a little weak in math or science or in English area, it's free. In fact, it's free for anyone in your family as long as they're in Deere. So I would definitely take some time to look at that website.
Okay, thank you. And by the way, I want to remind folks that if you're having technical difficulties, you can send questions in through the same question function. I've been helping a few people through some technical issues that are popping up now and then. A few more questions. Where do you go to get counseling, and where do I go to get counseling and financial aid help?
Well, hopefully, if you're in the United States, you're at a base. Every base should have a education office as such. They sometimes have different names. The Navy calls them Navy College offices. There's the Air Force Education Services, and the Army ACES office, Army Continuing Education System it stands for. Also, all of them now have educational portals online, and you can go there, and they have people that you can send emails to, and we'll get back to you. And a couple of the services, I know for sure the Navy, and I believe also the Army now has, and the National Guard for sure, has a call center that you can go and get the questions answered. So those would be all different sources. But if you're physically on a base, like if you were at NAS Pensacola here where I live in Florida, they have a regular education office. You can go down and sit with a real live human being and talk to them. And at most major bases, you'll find something like that.
Okay. Another question. Are the CLEP tests offered through the base education offices also free to family members?
It depends. For some of the services, they do. And I can go back to you and give you a full litany in what cases they are free to people. If you go to the Dante's website, they have a chart there that tells you, well, let's see, I just actually pulled it up. Spouses and civilian employees of the Air Force Reserve, the Air National Guard, the Army National Guard, the Army Reserve, and the Coast Guard do get funded CLEP tests, but not the active force. So unless it was one of those that I just read off, Air Force Reserve, Air National Guard, Army National Guard, Army Reserve, and Coast Guard, they all would get it free, but not anyone else. So I hope that answers your question.
Okay, another question here. Reservists are enrolled in DEERS, D-E-E-R-S, but do they have the same Dante's access?
Right. Oh yeah. No. If they are, yes, if they're a reserve or guard member, they can also get funded. If we're talking about Dante's, who primarily funds testing, and then a lot of these other resources I was talking about, like the study programs, etc., they would have that same access. Yes.
Okay. Here's an interesting question. Are the services of the education centers available to retirees who are continuing with the GI Bill?
Well, and I worked in education offices for many years, and I was in charge of all of them for the Navy. And although it is not in the core mission, generally speaking, an education office will take a retiree on space aid basis, space available. And I know when I worked at MacDill Air Force Base way back in the 70s, we used to talk to a lot of retired folks. So I guess the short answer is give a call to your ed center, but my guess is that they would certainly pitch in and talk to you over the phone, if nothing else, and help you out if they had some time.
Okay. Another question. How do I apply for My Caa?
Oh, okay. My Caa. That's also out on the website. They have an excellent website for My Caa, and it's through Military One Source. I think you'll find it also, and the whole process, step by step, is outlined there. And I highly recommend any of the spouses that are interested and eligible for that to go ahead. We're not primarily talking about that today, but that's a wonderful new program for spouses that can get $2,000 a year for 2 years, $4,000 altogether, to work on programs that help them become educationally ready for immediate employment or certification. So, but go to the website or just Google My Caa, and you'll see a website pop up where you can apply.
Okay, we might have time for one more question here. How do I get credit for my training?
Well, you already got it. And what I mean by that is certainly if you're in the Navy, automatically when you complete a tech school, you take an A school or whatever, those records, go to the Navy College Center, and they are immediately put in the basis, so to speak, of your Social Security number and the courses that you took into your transcript, into your SMART transcript. And a similar system works for the Army folks. Now, if you got out years ago, if you're a retiree, there are ways, if you gather up your training certificates, to get them back into the system. Although the Navy, when we created our system, went back and picked up people that had taken courses as long ago as 1971. So, if you got out before 71, you're in my category. You should be, on your way to Social Security and Medicare at this point. But there's
So, and here's one I will just answer for myself. Someone asks, is this webinar going to be available to listen to later? And I do want to remind people that we will have a recording of the webinar available that you'll be able to access. You'll be getting an email about that, hopefully within about a week of this event. With that, I would like to move forward to our last speaker, George Collin.
First of all, I want to thank everyone for coming out and visiting with us here. What I want to do for the next couple minutes here is perhaps even tie in some of the information that has already been heard, as my background as well stems from the U.S. Army, as I spent over 23 years in. And of course, when you get to those levels of leadership, we want to try to combine everything together and making it real for everyone. Most importantly, as I digress, into what I've done in my past, you always tend to go back and ask a question of yourself and say, what is it that I could have done better? And in doing better, what would I do to change? And I share with you one important thing here, and that is the ability to find the perfect blend. And what I mean by blend is that we as soldiers, we tend to do very well when it comes to making sure that our mission is actually accomplished, and to also ensure that we take care of soldiers and we lead them down the right path. In saying that, one of the other things that we do well as soldiers is that we tend to go back home and we take care of our families. We make sure that our kids are okay and that they're educated and that they're disciplined and clothed and all that good stuff here. But one of the things that I reminisce on, and that is one of the things that I think I could have done better, was to take care of myself. And what I mean by that is that we tend to take care of a lot of elements within our lives, but then we forget about ourselves, which leads into the importance of preparing yourself for when that uniform does come off. Next slide, please. It is no hidden secret that many of us spend time in the service, and it is that important element where that uniform will have to come off. And in saying that, now the question becomes, what am I going to do? And as one of the speakers here today mentioned, is that when you look up, the time has gone by, and now the question now lies is, what am I going to do? I steal a phrase from my brother, who stated something like, is to be or not to be, or better yet, who are you going to be? And that goes hand in hand with making sure that you're ready and that you are preparing yourself for your exit. One of the common things that I reminisce about on the reasons why, as Chief Harris has also mentioned, is, why am I not going back to school? What are my fears? What am I facing? When was the last time that you've actually gone to school, or am I too old? I mean, people come up with all these reasons why I cannot go back to school. And I share with you that, there are answers to all of those questions, but most importantly is that you have to face those fears head on. In saying that, in our service today, it is so competitive out there, whereas many soldiers are going to the field and they're coming back with all these combat patches, well-earned, and are seeking advancements for those positions that need to be filled. It is without any doubt that we are trying to instill that you still need to seek leadership and that you're going to be evaluated off of MOS type of stuff there, and that your weapons and other similar items are very, very important to your progression while in the service. But now most importantly is how do you distinguish yourself between the next person who is so similar to what you are and what you represent? And part of that answer lies on education. You know, one of the things that I failed as a young soldier, and that is to acknowledge tuition assistance and the programs that are available out there to finish school. You know, you get caught up in leading soldiers, whether it's in peacetime or combat time, and there's so many programs that are out there to assist, but yet we fail to take advantage of them. One of those programs that I have to openly say that I did not take advantage of it, and that was with the extra tuition assistance. This is a program that's separate from the GI Bill that's out there right now. And, you know, you are entitled to $4,500 in a physical year, and it's on a use or lose basis, but yet some of us lose it or would rather lose it than take advantage of it. You know, we have this new GI Bill that's actually in place right now. I believe that it's a good GI Bill, but if you were an old-timer like me, back when I joined here, one of the main goals that I had was to ensure that my children were also taken care of too. And in saying that, what I did is that, you know, throughout my whole career is that I set aside $25 every month to ensure that I was able to reach that old GI Bill cap of $10,800. Should I have taken advantage of using those programs such as tuition assistance, and now using it in conjunction with your actual GI Bill, half my problems probably would have been resolved already by just taking advantage of some of the opportunities that are actually there. You know, when you go into, or when you look at a reserve component, they too have benefits that sometimes go unused. One of the most common ones that I can tell you is that some of our folks that are out there right now, you know, they do go to drill, they do perform as a soldier, they may even do it on a weekend basis or every 2 weeks, but then they go and they have another job that they need to go to, and they're trying to make those ends meet. Well, there are ways that you can still be educated, use tuition assistance, and also use your GI Bill in a reserve component. Next slide, please. So now comes the question on what exactly is it that I have to do to be ready? You know, what is your experience, George? Tell me about it. And what I tell you, though, is most important, and when I'm talking kind of like in generic, like saying soldiers, I assure you that I'm talking in reference to service members. You know, one of the things that we do have an advantage over the next person, and that is using your military education to work for you. You know, going back to the fear element here, you know, many of us think, okay, I'm going to be in a classroom with a person who's 18, 19 years old, and I have to start at their level. Well, not so true, because if you maintain your experience and your history of your job performances and the training that you have received onto this monster called a military transcript, you know, you will be surprised on how far you have already gotten to at the levels of even getting your actual degree. You know, stuff such as, you know, basic training and your AITs and your leadership courses and some of the other training that's available to our military all goes into some type of transcript format. Many schools would ask of you to render what they call an ARCH transcript for the Army, a SMARCH transcript for the Navy, and actual Corps there, and then you have the CCAF, and of course that is the Air Force. So what I'm trying to wrap up and say here, friends, is that every part of your military career and the training that you have received can be placed on these transcripts and can be evaluated to work on and in your favor. The other point that I would like to stress here is that you have to use all of your resources. Today, a few of those resources were mentioned already, such as being able to take those actual CLEP exams. Some of us would actually even say, well, I am in a reserve component, and I don't have that feasibility to actually take a CLEP test. You know, there are alternate ways in making sure that you do take advantage of being CLEPed. Okay. When it comes to CCAF, they, as a person earlier mentioned, you know, what are the advantages of CCAF? Are they accredited and so forth? And the response that I heard was, yes, they are. And of course, I submit to you that not only with CCAF, which is an Air Force program, there's a program that goes deeper into a benefit, which is called the AU-ABC program, which is by the Air Force. And to give you a short definition, it's an agreement that certain universities have reached with CCAF that will consider your actual MOS and your training and your actual degree that you actually got or did earn. And if you choose a school that does accept that and is a participant of the AU-ABC program, your actual degree from CCAF will be accepted at face value. And of course, that's on a school-by-school basis. And of course, those who actually are actually participating, because not all schools do. And that pretty much wraps it up. I mean, my whole intention here was to wrap up what had already been said and the importance of us as service members to step forward, recognize that there is going to be a time where you're going to have to step out of the uniform and to prepare yourself for the inevitable, which is to go now to corporate America. Subject to any questions, that concludes my portion.
Okay, we do have some questions for you. And interesting, we even have a few comments where people are kind of giving each other some recommendations, some comments here. One person says, do CLEPs. It cut almost a year off my degree by using them. So some recommendation from a attendee. And I agree that the longer, let's see, you are in, the more obstacles, excuses that there are, more responsibility, probability, there are more family commitments. I think what he's saying is the longer you put off your education, the more you run into excuses. Here's an interesting question. Do you feel that an online degree is looked down upon in comparison to a traditional degree?
Me personally here, I mean, my experience revolves around the Army Recruiting Command. In fact, I served there for 16 long years. Great years, though. I have a couple degrees as it relates to, you know, an online school versus going into a regular school, brick and mortar school. You know, as I go around country and talking to service members about going to school, I mean, most importantly is what is convenient for you. Okay, is it I have the availability to go downtown and get into school, or should I be doing in an online environment? Now, being a natural leader here, I will share with you that the answer to that question lies amongst that service member, because they are the only one that can say, yes, I can or cannot do. Now, if it's something new, what I always recommend is to actually experiment with it and see whether you can do stuff like that. If you're brand new to the education field, I highly recommend that maybe you might want to look at a local school first and then test drive going to online school. But to get to the answer to that question, there aren't any differences that I'm aware of when it comes to getting an actual degree with an online school versus getting it from a regular school.
Okay. Here's. Oh, would you like to add something? Yes, go ahead.
Jeff Cropsey again, and you know, over the years, I think that things have changed greatly about that, and the fact is that most colleges and universities have online programs, and when you get a degree, it doesn't say, you know, Bachelor of Arts, parentheses, online. And the point is that the same kind, like George was saying, the same kind of courses and requirements that you'd have to take in residence are also required for online. So I think it's pretty much considered now in civilian world the very same. And as I said, there's no stamp on your forehead one way or the other. The main thing is that you went to a school that had a good, strong program and did well.
Okay, here's an interesting question. Do you recommend students take a third-party self-assessment test to see if they will be successful taking an online course based on their personal lifestyle, or probably not just lifestyle, but maybe personality traits as well? Any thoughts on that from any of our?
I mean, we used to have those, available through Dante's, and sure, I mean, why not take something that reflects back to you? Because a lot of this, it does have to do with your lifestyle. I think online study, perhaps more than resident study, requires some self-discipline, because essentially you can put it off. You know, it's not like every Tuesday and every Thursday night at 8 o'clock you have to be somewhere. It's like, well, I've got 6 weeks to do this stuff. Now, most schools, Grantham is certainly one of them, have, student success teams that will kind of nag you to make sure you keep going. But I think one of the factors you would have to consider, and sometimes that helps in reflecting through some sort of measuring device, is if you have that. Also, your basic skill levels. And there I would recommend, again, it's free, it's paid for by Department of Defense, Coast Guard can use it, everybody can use it that's in the military. Go to that Dante's website and use the OSAC, the Online Academic Skills course, which will reflect back to you what your strengths and weaknesses are, and give you a good idea if you're ready for that kind of independent study.
Mm-hmm. And actually, I want to even add a little bit. I'm from the online education arena as well, and what I found is that probably the #1 skill needed to be successful in an online course is the ability to structure your life around your education, around work and family commitments, because you need the discipline, as you mentioned, to put in the number of hours a week you need to put in online when you don't have a particular place you have to be Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 9 to 10 a.m. And what I've seen is that working adults, and certainly the military, probably more than most, have that self-discipline, the ability to structure their lives around their education. And in my mind, the working adult is probably more likely to be successful in an online course than, say, the high school graduate who still hasn't developed that sort of life skill of structuring your life. So, yeah, my view, that is probably the most important skill. I don't know if you guys would agree or disagree. Here's another interesting question. It seems like everyone has his or her, everyone is in the process of achieving a master's degree. Does a bachelor's degree hold much weight anymore in civilian life? Hello?
I tell you what, I can maybe start in on that one. I was surprised when I went through some of my job applications after retiring. I was surprised to see the number of applicants that had master's degrees that were looking for the same job I was applying for. So if it helps the person that asked the question, if it helps you put it in this perspective, if everybody's got one, that just means you better darn well get one all the more. Maybe the bar has been raised. I don't think that cheapens the fact that you've got it. It almost now is the new requirement, if you want to think of it like that. But, the only advice I can give you is if you got the benefits, I used TA to finish my master's degree. Not only did I finish my 4-year and my master's degree, but I did it debt-free. And actually, with GI Bill, put money in my pocket, made money on the deal. If you can do it, then all other questions really are kind of irrelevant. There isn't a good reason why not to do it.
Yeah, and I guess I would add that in many fields, a bachelor's degree, of course, is simply a minimum requirement. It's without it, the door won't even open. So I think if that would not, the fact that many people are getting master's degrees would not deter you from getting a bachelor's, because that would need to be the first step if that's the kind of field you're in. Let's see. Do all schools participate in the AFUA ABC program?
No.
The answer is no. Not all schools participate in it, but there is a large spread of schools that do. In other words, it's if you go in there, you go through the Air Force portal and you choose your MOS, or I'm sorry, your AFSC, and then it gives you all those partner schools in there. And that was kind of the Cliff Notes version of how to get to it. If you really want to know step-by-step how to do it, you got to use your CAT card and all that. Just I'll correspond with you on email later if you really need the step-by-step. But basically, you can pull down a list. So let's say your AFSC is a 1 Charlie 5. you will have 4 pages of schools that are offering degrees for the 1 Charlie 5 CCAF AUABC program partnership.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and if you don't mind, let me make a plug. I'll make one unabashed plug for Grantham, because the schools have to be invited and they have to be approved by the Air Force before they're allowed to partner as AUABC schools, as John Harris was pointing out, and Grantham is honored to be one of those schools.
Oh, okay, great. Here's another question. Let's see. Oh, we're getting a lot of people thanking. I get to help you know, let you guys know we're getting a lot of people thanking you for your insight. So I have to kind of scroll up to find the questions now as they move quickly here.
Hey, John.
Yes.
There's
Yes.
one other thing that I would like to point out as a recommendation is that, you know, the CLEP test and other similar tests are valuable tools and stuff, and the only suggestion or recommendation that I make to my fellow service members is that when you're about to take the exam that you've chosen to, ensure that the university that you've chosen to attend will accept it.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, there's not an overlaps in the timing factor here.
Okay. And how about one last question here? Do online colleges help people put together a resume, maybe work on their interviewing skills, and basically give them some direction in how to pursue jobs after graduation?
We at Grantham University have a dedicated person here who builds off of the actual military programs that are out there, such as TAP and ACAP, as just to mention a few. But we have a dedicated person here who does assist service members with resumes and up-to-date information.
Okay. Well, with that, we are reaching the end of our presentation here. I would like to thank again our 3 presenters for the information you provided. I would like to remind our audience members, if your question did not get answered, our presenters will be able to respond to you directly, and we will have a recording available of this event soon. So thank you very much for your participation, and please keep your eyes open for further events from Grantham University dedicated to the service member. Thank you, and goodbye.